Did Earl Spence accept the Terence Crawford fight for 2023? Fact versus fiction. What's good, everybody? It's your boy, Cardinal Red Sports. Let's talk about it. So, reports coming out surrounding Earl Spence, his next fight, who it'll be, when it'll be, and why it will be. So, some people are reporting that Earl Spence will be fighting Keith Thurman in the summertime. Some people are saying that that fight is off because of what Keith Thurman did in the past. And some people are reporting that Earl Spence will be fighting Terence Crawford at the end of the year or after the summertime. And that's the part I really want to address. You know, there's a lot of news surrounding Earl Spence at the moment, and I think a lot of people are, for a lack of a better word, you know, they're getting you to rage click, basically, because all the information that's out right now is not exactly true information. And, you know, it's sad, but hey, people do what they got to do, man, to get money. So it is what it is at this point. So, Earl Spence and Keith Thurman, let's start there. So, as far as Keith Thurman goes, you know, it's kind of a touch and go topic, especially when you talk about Thurman and Spence, because everybody knows their history. Everybody knows what went on when, once again, Keith Thurman was the champion and him sidelining Earl Spence. The fact of the matter is, that is the easiest fight to be made. So I think that most people who are fans of either PBC or are fans of Keith Thurman, they're really pushing the narrative for Thurman to get that shot. Hey, I don't blame him. Thurman basically has been inactive for 5 years is the problem with all of that. You know, I know the WBC mandated it, but I think that was a mistake made by the WBC. Now, there are ways for Earl Spence to get out of that fight. If you watch my Adrian Broner video, you can go find out the way that Earl Spence can get out of that fight. And it's simple for him to get out of that fight. If he doesn't want the Keith Thurman fight, he doesn't have to take the Keith Thurman fight. Everybody keeps saying that it's mandated. It's mandated. Earl Spence has had a lot of mandated fights that got passed over. Emino Santanillos has been mandated for 2 years. He hasn't stepped in a ring with Emino Santanillos. Listen, Earl Spence has had 3 belts for over a year now. Over a year. 2 of those belts hadn't been defended in almost 3 years, you know, as far as mandatories go. The IBF hasn't been defended in 4 years. So at the moment, none of the sanctioning bodies, I think, can take precedent over another sanctioning body. Now, they can all come together and come to agreements on certain things, but I don't think any one of those sanctioning bodies has precedent over the other one. Now, people are saying that undisputed it trumps mandatory. I would say yes and no. Undisputed only trumps mandatory if it makes sense for the A side. You know, the A side is not going to take an undisputed fight that they think that they're going to lose. So it only trumps mandatory if it benefits the 2 parties involved. The 2 parties involved are only going to take an undisputed fight if it's mutually beneficial. Now, they would much rather, I'm sure, go with their mandatory if their mandatory is an easier fight. So it's not necessarily that undisputed trumps mandatory. It's that fighters sometimes choose the undisputed route because it's an easier fight, an easier out than taking on their mandatory challenger. Listen, I think Earl Spence would much rather fight Terence Crawford than fight Boots Ennis. I think Terence Crawford would much rather fight Earl Spence than fight Boots Ennis. That's just a given. You know, it has nothing to do with undisputed trumping mandatory. That has nothing to do with that, and the sanctioning bodies don't control everything. Actually, the sanctioning bodies probably fall second to the promoters. The promoters control everything because they're the ones with the money. You know, it's funny to hear boxing fans talk because everybody goes off of what they feel and what they believe and what benefits their favorite fighter and not what's effing true. Now let's move on to Terence Crawford. Terence Bud Crawford. Is Errol Spence actually going to fight Terence Crawford in 2023? And I would say there is a 10% chance of that actually happening. And there's a reason I'm saying there's only a 10% chance, because now let's go off of everybody's logic that's putting out videos right now, because everybody's going off the narrative that it's a guarantee Errol Spence is going to fight Keith Thurman next. Now, Errol Spence said he most likely won't be returning to the ring until June, maybe July. June is the date that people are putting out there. June. Okay, so June. Let's just say he actually fights in June, which I doubt. If he's planning on recovering all the way up to June, that means the fight won't be until 6 to 8 weeks after June, which puts you into July, August. August. All the way up until August, he might not have a fight. They're talking about summertime. Okay, so if he fights in August, then you can pretty much cancel any type of Terence Crawford fight. I don't see how you fit a Crawford fight and an Amino Santanillos or Virgil Ortiz fight in there at the end of the year, or either or, because I think what's going to end up happening, let's say he doesn't take the Amino Santanillos fight, but there's a long negotiating process after the Keith Thurman fight. Do you think that they can hammer this thing out in less than 4 months when it took them almost 8 months just to figure out that there was no guarantee last time? Like, what people are saying doesn't make sense, and they're once again trying to get you to rage click based off of what they feel and not what the facts are. Okay, now let's say that the Thurman fight actually happens in June. Let's say the Thurman fight, he actually fights Thurman in June, and they get it done at the beginning of the summer. So June, maybe July. Even if they get it done in June, you got to give the fighter 6 to 8 weeks to recover, which means that's another 2 months. So if it happens in June, let's just stick to June. Forget about July. If it happens in June, then you have July, August, which means that his next fight couldn't potentially happen till the end of September, beginning of October. Now, it could be possible that they could sneak a Terence Crawford fight in at the end of the year, but then you're going to have problems with the venue. Where do you put it at? Because once again, you're back into those cold months, so you can't stick it in a football stadium because nobody's going to come to a football stadium at the beginning of fall, mid-fall, beginning of winter to watch a boxing fight in the cold. It's just not going to happen. People don't think everything all the way through, so I don't see that fight, and I say that because more than likely Errol Spence is picking the venue. More than likely it's not going to happen in Vegas. More than likely they're going to put it in Dallas Cowboy Stadium. More than likely you want 100,000 people at that fight because it can generate that. I don't understand why they would stick it out Vegas in a smaller venue to where you can't make as much money, or why they would take it out Vegas knowing that Errol Spence can put 100,000 butts in a Dallas Cowboy Stadium. I just don't see that happening. And I do believe that was one of the factors that made Terence Crawford pull out the first time, was the venue and the placing of the fight. But, Errol Spence is the A-side, so he's going to get to dictate that. So, at the most, or at the best, if you rush everything, if you rush it, then you could possibly get a Terence Crawford fight at the end of 2023. Perhaps October, November, maybe December. That is the closest you could probably get to a Terence Crawford fight in 2023. But more than likely, this is an event that shouldn't be rushed. So I think that they would more than likely carry it over to 2024. Why rush it? You're already at the end of the year. Errol Spence would have just taken a decent fight with Keith Thurman, and I don't understand why he would need to turn right around and fight Terence Crawford. Not to mention the fact that the WBA did put into writing that Amino Santos or Virgil Ortiz has to be next. It's like people just keep bypassing that because of people actually believe that undisputed trumps the mandatories. And just refer back to what I said earlier. It only trumps the mandatories if it's mutually beneficial for both parties. It has nothing to do with the sanctioning bodies. It really has nothing to do with the undisputed fight itself. It's only because that the undisputed fight is more money or is easier than taking on a challenger who might not be worth anything in the eyes of the public because they're not known yet, or a fight that you might lose. you know, those are the real factors involved in why sometimes the undisputed does trump the mandatory. Has nothing to do with the sanctioning bodies or the undisputed fight itself. It's just, hey, it is what it is at this point. So for everybody saying that Keith Thurman is next, I think y'all really just need to be patient, man. I'm not sure if Keith Thurman is next. Errol Spence keeps telling y'all he's not fighting Thurman. But I think everybody believes because Thurman is PBC that fight is automatically going to happen next. We just have to wait and see. As far as Crawford goes, there's a possibility he might fight Crawford in 2023, but more than likely that fight isn't happening either in 2023. Unless Terence Crawford really submits to all their demands. Then that might be something different if he submits to all their demands. As well, you have to keep in mind that Amino Santos and Virgil Ortiz have already been guaranteed something. So for Errol Spence to try to stuff all of that into one 8-month period is astronomical for you to believe, man, if you believe that. It's your boy Cardinal Red Sports. Hit that like button for me, share, subscribe. Holler at me on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. More than likely to get a response on the tube, so holler at me over there. It's your boy, and we are
It's for the summer, man. It's summer. Hey, look, I ain't shorty. I ain't gonna hold you back. Do your thing.
The party just started, I ain't even had a drink yet. Hope she got a drink, cause me and Keith, we wanna spank that. Girls running slow on the floor when I like that. Grabbing on the ass, she ain't even trying to bite back.
That means she like it. Now turn around, take it to the floor, pick it up and bring it right back. You thought I wasn't gonna pull nothing, leaving out the parking lot with a car full of them.
Type and penetration, that's the only way I give it to you. Magnum XL, that's the only thing that's fitting to the big size. Hope you got some breasts with them big thighs. Guess so, cause I can see let's go in the eyes.
Man, you know I got the poker. She like how I look in my Lacoste loafers. Now let me get my hand on the Optimo. When she can go and put her hands on my boxer hole, you know? It's crazy, man. I'm sipping on something biracial. Hey, man.